The following program is sponsored by Jewish Federation of Palm Beach County.
Welcome to our 47th season of Mosaic. I'm your host, Susan Shulman Pertnoy. Mosaic is Jewish Federation of Palm Beach County's weekly news magazine, exploring the most critical issues facing Jews here and around the world. Today's guest is a fascinating warrior for truth in what he calls the media wars. Dan Feferman joins Mosaic to talk about the fight against misinformation and propaganda. What can we do about it? Stay tuned to find out. Did you know that you can now enjoy Mosaic on the go? Listen to the Mosaic podcast by scanning the QR code on the screen or find it wherever you listen to podcasts.
The Activate Jewish Life movement is a first of its kind, intends to connect with families with children, to connect with teens, to connect with young adults. However people want to engage with Jewish life, we want to make sure that we are providing them with an opportunity to engage in ways that have relevance and meaning for them. What an opportunity we have to change the face of Jewish life.
Welcome back. Today we're joined by Dan Feferman, and I'm going to read his credentials because they are too numerous to memorize. You are an author, speaker, a former Israeli Defense Forces intelligence officer and policy advisor, media strategist and entrepreneur, peace activist, and a leading role in combating anti-Semitism. Dan, it is a pleasure to have you join us.
Thanks, Susan. It's so great to finally be on the show.
Yeah, we've been trying to do this for quite some time.
Absolutely.
You also have a very interesting background. From being in the IDF to researching for think tanks. Can you briefly share some of your...
Yeah, so I made Aliyah. I moved to Israel from Indiana about 21 years ago, and I was fascinated by the world of foreign affairs, intelligence affairs, the Middle East in general. And so when I made Aliyah, I looked as a way to continue my university studies, my internships in Washington, and I was fortunate enough to join a very special place in the Israel Defense Forces that deals with policy planning, thinking as far as strategy, advising the general staff and the defense ministry on national security and foreign policy affairs, and managed to, between that and then of course the intelligence worlds in Israel, managed to have a nice introduction into the world of international affairs and hardcore Middle East issues and security issues, and you get to know the world in a very special way when you deal with those matters.
You certainly do, and most of your career has been strongly influenced by combating anti-Semitism. And as a matter of fact, in 2020, shortly after the Abraham Accords were signed, you co-founded an organization called Sharaka. Please share what that's about.
Yeah, definitely one of the highlights, one of the cool things I've done, and that's where we first met when I was involved in that. So at the time I was up to the Abraham Accords. I was a fellow at the Jewish People Policy Institute. I was a research fellow, including dealing with research on anti-Semitism and anti-Israel movements and delegitimization. I was so inspired by the Abraham Accords, by the promise of change that it offered in the region. And I was one of the first Israelis. I used my American passport to get to the UAE before everyone else. And I was blown away by what I had seen in the UAE, in Dubai specifically at the time, that there is a different promise. There's a different hope. There's a different future for the Middle East. All we see on the news is radicalism and extremism and wars and terrorism and ultra conservative Islam. And here you saw something very different. I know you went on one of those trips with me.
Yes, you were the scholar in residence, which was a privilege.
Absolutely. And you see that the Middle East can be very different. But if we want to make the peace lasting and real, we have to bridge this massive gap. And that's the gap of 7 decades that the Arab world was fed day and night misinformation, dangerous misinformation and demonization about Israel, about the Jews. And for the longest time, they weren't even allowed to engage with the average Israeli citizen.
To even know how to
right.
have a clue that nothing was true.
And that we were, normal people just like them, and that we were interested in peace. And they had no idea about the history of the Jewish people. They had no idea about the history of the Jews in the Middle East because, the Jews of the Middle East, including my own family, were basically ethnically cleansed from most of the Middle East, 75, 80 years ago. And so there was a lot of work in education, in bridge building, just building those human connections. And so we set about to do that. And I was very fortunate to be able to head that organization for a good 3+ years.
How did you find the individuals in the Gulf states to participate? Because you wound up having very influential members of societies there working with you.
Yeah, it's one of these things that these people are out there. So in the Gulf states, in Morocco, in some of the Arab countries, it's very dangerous. So they exist, but it's very dangerous for them to speak up. If you live in Egypt, if you live in, until recently, Lebanon or Syria, you can be arrested. If you live in Iraq, you can be jailed or even executed for contact with Zionists, is what the laws are. But there are some countries where it is safe, and then of course the Abraham Accords made it legal, and means the government protected them. And of course you have people of Middle Eastern descent who live in Europe, in the United States, or people from all over the Middle East who live in Dubai. It's sort of, how Manhattan or Hong Kong is, right? Kind of these hubs, these cosmopolitan hubs. And they just didn't have a recourse for these kinds of interactions and engagements. So once we built the platform and we aggressively, put it out there in the media and social media, public events, anyone who was looking for this kind of engagement, we became kind of the magnet for that and the hub for that, and that was really the goal.
And then you would bring them to Israel and tell it what
that was
you
always
did.
That was always the highlight. A lot of I don't know if the listeners, certainly the ones from the Jewish community, have heard of Birthright, right? Trips where young Jews who get to go often on their first eye-opening trip to Israel. So we always joke that this is sort of Birthright for Arabs. We would build relationships with people from the Arab world, and eventually we expanded to people from different Muslim countries beyond the Arab world. 2/3 of Muslims are not Arab. We would organize these educational trips, and you would see first of all, you'd see so much apprehension, fear before they come, because they've been fed. If you watch Al Jazeera, if you watch Arab social media networks, and every single trip, right, and I led dozens of these trips, every single trip they get off the plane in Ben Gurion Airport, and they see trilingual signs, Hebrew, Arabic, English.
They must be shocked.
They see women with hijabs, visibly Muslim women walking around, airport employees, right? You see a very multicultural society. And the walls of fear just keep collapsing one by one with every interaction. They walk down the street, they see Arab families walking alongside Jewish families, and they realize everything they've been told about Israel is wrong. Not just wrong, but diametrically opposed to everything they thought. And their eyes open, and they understand that everything they were taught is a lie. And they began questioning everything, and they began exploring. There's a whole week of exploration and relationship building, and it's just it was so inspiring to facilitate that, but also to see it and to be a part of their journey and the questions they ask. They don't even realize that they think all Jews are Hasidic Jews from Brooklyn, because that's what their media tells them.
Right.
They don't realize that most Jews that they see in Israel are not white. right?
Right.
That it's a very Middle Eastern country, that we eat the same foods as they do. We have the same kind of mentality and kind of cadence and the same kind of mannerisms as they do. And it's a very eye-opening trip for them. Then they learn the actual history of Israel, of who the Jews are. They learn about Judaism. They don't even realize that Islam comes from Judaism as sort of a sister faith. And so all of these things start to unfold over the course of this week. And they come away, for the most part, very, very changed people.
So then what do they do with this?
So it depends who they are. Ideally, and the kind of people we would try to engage are people who would then go back to their societies and do something with it. So it's either people with large media or social media platforms. It's professors, it's faith leaders, imams. Sometimes it's civic leaders, just people respected in their professions as doctors or marketing professionals or people connected to policy people in government. The idea is that they do something with what they learned. Not everyone does. Some people are timid. Some people come away and they don't want to face the social backlash, because a lot of people did go back to their countries, including the safe ones, and they would face social media backlash for being traitors, for daring to go see.
What a risk they take then.
They take risks, right. So even if they're physically safe, they're going to face social pressure, and they don't always want to deal with it. But for the most part, they began, their own social media feeds change, their conversations with other people change. Ideally, then what we're really looking for is people who will initiate social programs in their own countries, educational programs, or people who will then recruit the next delegation. We had one guy who's a very big social media influencer from Morocco, and a few months later he came back with an entire delegation of other influencers that he recruited to come on the trip.
Oh, that's remarkable.
And so, one guy with tens of thousands of followers turned into a whole trip of people with tens of thousands of followers each. And that's how you slowly build momentum.
But you took it to another level. You were able to bring some of them to college campuses here and help debunk the BDS movement. You had Arabs in hijabs talking to Arab students and saying, no, you're wrong, it's all misinformation. Yeah. That must have been so gratifying to see that.
It's incredibly meaningful. And by the way, it's not just about Israel, because the same lies, the same misinformation, the same extremism also goes after the moderates in the Middle East, and they try to silence their voices. And so what they realize, and what we all realized, is that it's not just them speaking up for Israel or against anti-Semitism. They're speaking for their own rights as moderate, peace-seeking Arabs or Muslims in their own societies, because the Islamists and the extremists, right, the same people behind the BDS movement,
right,
is Islamist movements, Muslim Brotherhood movements. They're also trying to silence their voices in the Middle East.
Well, we see that happening, and we're going to talk about that in our next segment, but we have to take a quick break. We'll be right back after this brief message. When we come back, more from Dan Feferman, including an update on the Abraham Accords. Stay with us. We're so proud to celebrate our community visionaries, donors who contribute $1 million or more, serving as an inspiration for all of Jewish Palm Beach.
If you want to make a difference in the lives of people, there's no better place to be engaged, involved, and give than the Jewish Federation of Palm Beach County.
And being a part of our collective efforts, we are able to strengthen Jewish life, care for those people in need, care for the people of Israel, and confront anti-Semitism and acts of hatred against the Jewish community.
This is just the beginning. We can build this community even bigger and better.
Together, we can look to a very, very bright future.
Now is the time. Come and try something that you've never tried before.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Join us because the mission of the Federation has never been more critical than it is today.
Did you know that you can now enjoy Mosaic on the go? Listen to the Mosaic podcast by scanning the QR code on the screen or find it wherever you listen to podcasts. We're back chatting with Dan Feferman about anti-Israel sentiment around the world and antisemitism and ways to combat it. After October 7th, you felt a need to do something because of the horrific anti-Israel sentiment that was running rampant in the world stage. So you formed a media company called ME24. Tell us about that.
Yeah, ME24, Middle East 24. At the time I was still heading Sharaka and dealing with Arabs from all over the Middle East on a regular basis. I was seeing the shocking levels of misinformation, disinformation, anti-Israel, anti-Semitic venom, the lies, the propaganda. If I wasn't in Israel and as tapped into reality as I am, I would have believed it. It was so convincing and it was so widespread. And as I began to dig deeper into what was happening, I realized that there was a vicious, very well-funded, very well-coordinated media campaign and social media campaign against Israel. By the way, it's not just against Israel. It's against Israel as a way to weaken Western civilization, Western society's abilities to defend themselves. And so I realized as meaningful as what we were doing in Sharaka was, there was a much bigger and more urgent fight that needed to be, a challenge that needed to be addressed. And so I got together with a number of colleagues, media professionals, journalists, researchers from the Arab world, either living still in the Arab world or in the West. And we came up with the idea for a 24/7 news platform focused all about the Middle East that would proactively and preemptively counter all of these lies and misinformation coming from Hamas, coming from other Islamist organizations and terror organizations, Hezbollah and the Houthis, coming from Qatar. Qatar is the engine and the money behind a lot of these misinformation campaigns.
More so than Iran?
Iran also, but Qatar is much more savvy, much more sophisticated, and has a lot more wealth at its disposal. Al Jazeera, for example, is a Qatari propaganda Islamist media network that has tricked the world, has tricked the West into thinking that this is just good journalism about the Middle East. And we realized the depth of this challenge, and so I felt that I had to move on to my next and bigger challenge, together with a number of excellent colleagues from all over the region. I have partners from Syria, from the UAE and Saudi Arabia and other places, and we basically launched a news platform to take all of this on and to be the voice of the new Middle East, to be the liberal, kind of moderate voice of the Middle East. People don't really realize this outside of the region. People in the region understand this well. There's no free media in the Middle East. There's no free press. There's no liberal independent media. All of the media in the Middle East, outside of Israel, I'm talking, Israel has free press. Outside of Israel, the media in the Middle East is either state-run propaganda or Muslim Brotherhood propaganda from Qatar. That's it.
So how did you break into this?
Sometimes you just have to start. And so in today's media world, there's a lot you can do with new media and social media platforms. And the way people consume media, especially younger demographics today, is very different. You're right, we don't need massive news studios and giant buildings and crews all over the world. There's a lot you can do with aggregating. There's a lot you can do with decoding media, kind of giving simple context and explanations, and creating the content and doing the storytelling that you want to tell. And so because if you are, and it dawned on me in my hundreds and hundreds of speaking tours with Sharaka around the US, it dawned on me hosting hundreds of people from all over the Middle East and Israel, seeing what they see, understanding why they think the way they do and where they get their information from. And if you are the average educated, intelligent person today in the world, in the West, here in the United States, here in Florida, and you want to get really good, sound, trustworthy information and analysis about the Middle East.
It's almost an oxymoron.
Right?
Yes.
There's nowhere to go.
Right.
There's nowhere to go. If you are not already pro-Israel, you're going to assume, maybe rightfully so, but you're going to assume that Israeli media is just Israeli propaganda. And Israeli media is free media, but it is Israel-focused. It is Israel-centered. Let's be clear on that. If you want to get good, authentic, fast, reliable information from the Middle East, there's nowhere to go. And so a lot of people think Al Jazeera is that, and there's other Qatari outlets that pose as reliable media. The Western media is not reliable about the Middle East. It doesn't understand the Middle East. It gives oftentimes as much, if not more, of a platform to the Islamist radical voices as it does the moderate voices in the region, when it doesn't realize that they are not playing the fair and free media game. They are doing propaganda.
But but it's so pervasive that to combat that has to be, don't they look at your news outlet with a skew, because all of a sudden you're coming in with such a different perspective? Why do they know that that's the truth and the other isn't? Maybe they think you have an agenda.
Some might, and I think people should be in general skeptical about media. I think people should be skeptical about all media. But at the end of the day, first of all, the quality of the content from a visual perspective, which is, by the way, Al Jazeera is fantastic at that. The quality of what
it is. I've watched it.
The
and it's
production quality is
very
excellent.
Believable.
But I do think people are smart at the end of the day, and if they are given an alternative and they realize that it is more intellectually honest, it is more reflective of reality, right? Then they will, at the end of the day, go to that. And our numbers are reflecting that. You know, we started out with a few thousand followers, and we're now at, we surpassed, and this is not yet impressive, but it will be, 40,000 followers on X, 10,000 followers on Instagram. But we surpassed 75 million content views already.
And you're only about 6 months old.
We're 6 months old, and we're just getting started.
So let's go back. Who is your target audience? I mean, you don't have Israelis as part of your group. I think you need to explain that.
Yeah, only under 3% of our audience is in Israel. We want a global following. We want people who are genuinely interested in the Middle East, people who want to really know what's going on, people who want a news and analysis sources that they can trust. And so our audience is really global, and it's reflecting that. So,
but they don't think that Israel's behind this. You've made that.
Israel's not behind this.
Okay, you've made that very clear in how you.
I am one Israeli on a very, very big team of people from all over the region. This is really a tremendous organic reflection of the region as a region of moderate, liberal, intellectual voices from all over the region, literally from Morocco to Islamabad, and everything in between. And I'm one of the team. I'm one of the puzzle pieces. But it's not about Israel. It's about there's a new Middle East, and it's not being given its platform. And so we're giving that Middle East its platform. I'm just one of a number of voices.
One of the most confusing aspects for many of us is that you see groups such as the LGBTQ community in lockstep with marching for a Palestinian cause and the Arab world. What's that about?
There has been a decades-long process, in a very, again, purposeful, planned process of groups that do not seek any good they're not marching for the Palestinians. I want to be very clear. Okay? They're seeking to undermine the West. They're seeking to undermine and unravel Israel. And I'm talking about not the thousands of people who see marching. I'm talking the people who organized the protests. I'm talking about the people who connected the LGBT rights movement to supposedly the Free Palestine movement. The people behind these movements are using people who actually care about such issues as LGBT rights, etc., as a way to infiltrate and radicalize the West. They don't care about the Palestinians for 1 second. I have many Palestinian friends, colleagues. We have Palestinian contributors at ME24 who are attacked as traitors, as sellouts because they want an actual better life for the
Right,
Gazans and
of
for the
course.
Palestinians. And one of these gentlemen, he's one of the more famous people. He went on a show where it's him debating 20 free Palestine activists. Most of them were not even Arab, and they were attacking him. This guy's a Gazan who lost 30 family members in Gaza. They were attacking him as a sellout and a traitor when he wants to actually improve life
Right.
and raise the living conditions for the actual Palestinians. And they're calling him a sellout and a traitor because what the Islamists and the far left have done, utilizing the Palestinian issue as a sacrificial lamb here, is they want to sacrifice the actual Palestinians as part of this cause because their goals are not practical goals and they don't care anything about the actual Palestinians on the ground. And so you see this to take over these spaces and utilize them to attack Israel, not to actually help the Palestinians.
It's so convoluted, but it works, which is so unfortunate. Here at our federation, we have just created a center to activate Jewish life, to help with Jewish identity and resilience. How would you suggest that people can help with this media war?
Well, I mean, you mentioned the Center for Jewish Life, and I know the Federation also has another fantastic program, and that's the Center to Combat Hate and Antisemitism. And we, as Jewish people, as people who are pro-Israel, we can't always be focused on the combating and the negative, right? That's not enough. You also have to have a positive. And being Jewish, Judaism, being pro-Israel, being Zionist has so much to offer that's positive. It's not just about defending and combating. There's such a rich bookshelf. There's such a rich history. There's so many rich traditions. And the best, way to ensure that we are not only fighting anti-Semitism, but living full Jewish lives is to really get that Jewish literacy, that Jewish pride, to make sure we're carrying on from generation to generation in a positive way, not just defending ourselves when we're being attacked. And so that's where a Center for Jewish Life plays such an important role. Okay, we'll always have anti-Semitism and we'll always need to combat it and defeat it. But the best thing we can do is to ensure that we have strong, resilient Jewish identities that are positive, that are forward-looking, and that are rooted in our unbelievable, thousands-year-old traditions.
On that note, we want to thank you for joining us.
I'm so glad to be here, and thank you for having me.
This program is sponsored by Jewish Federation of Palm Beach County.